Hello and welcome to a sunny morning in downtown Dubai. We're going to be demonstrating a complete mission of an A-10C Warthog. This will not be a normal mission, however, as we've specifically selected a target range and we'll be using a variety of weapons ranging from the AIM-9 Sidewinder, IR Mavericks, dumb bombs, laser-guided bombs, cluster munitions, GPS-guided bombs, camera Mavericks, and the 70mm rocket. And these particular 70mm rockets we also have laser guidance packages on. So having done a walk around of our aircraft to make sure everything looks right, we'll go ahead and climb aboard and look at the mission briefing. Briefing, as you see, is of course 8 o'clock in the morning, starting in the Persian Gulf. We have a KC-135 supporting us. We're basically going to do some target shooting, and we have some information that will become important later. The tanker is at waypoint 1. Our communications with it are on 301. Its TACAN is 1X. We're going to be operating from Dubai International. For advanced navigation, our landing approach can be determined with TACAN by tuning to 99 X-ray and picking a spot that is bearing 233 from the TACAN at 12 miles. Our air traffic control frequency is 118.75. We're going to be operating from runway 30 right, which has an ILS of 110.9er. The actual heading of this runway is 302 degrees. I've made notes of those things on my scratch pad that I keep at my desk so that I can make use of them without having to bring the briefing screen back up again. And I recommend this practice if you're going to be doing some of the detailed stuff I will be demonstrating today. As a rule, I have a HOTAS with every switch and button mapped according to their actual function. With one exception, my landing gear warning horn is actually mapped to my gear up because I find that I use the gear up lever, the gear up down lever, more frequently than I use the warning horn silence button. I will be making a point of pointing to actual controls when it's relevant. I will generally not talk about the specific default keybinds, as many people choose to change these. I will talk about the functions. If you use keybinds, please do. Please use the ones that are comfortable to you. I do intend that this mission will be uploaded to user files, so if you want to follow along, there will be a link in the description of this video. So, let's start. Let's see if our airplane will actually start. Also of note, I do not use VR. I fly flat panel, and I'm using a hat on my thumb switch to move my camera around where it's relevant. So one of the things we're going to do now that we're on board our aircraft is we're going to tell the ground crew to stow the boarding ladder.
Stow the boarding ladder. Copy.
Okay. First up, I'm going to hit the battery. We see the lights come on, so the battery's working. Set the inverter. We see our fuel showing here. And check to make sure that we have fuel. Our internal fuel says we have a little more than 5,500 pounds. We're going to test the indicator, see that it goes to 5,900 and back down. That means that our fuel is reading right and is present. Then we're going to turn on the APU. As the APU starts, we're going to observe the APU RPM comes up. When it reaches 100%, we're going to activate the APU generator. We're confirming that our engine generators are in the on position. Our oxygen flow is in the on position. Now that we have AC power, and because it takes a long time, we're also going to turn on our CDU navigation and EGI. That will power up, and it will begin its automatic alignment while we do other things. I did mention that since we're over on this panel, that our TACAN for the tanker is going to be 1 X-ray, so I'm going to go ahead and dial that in now. And our ILS for later is 110.9. So I've gone ahead and dialed that in. It's not going to matter until we're actually in the air. Over here, we're going to turn on our radios. And we're going to tune our VHF radio to our air traffic control frequency, which is 118.75, which we noted in the briefing. There we go. Now that we have that tuned in on, the proper thing to do is to ask for permission to start the engines.
Tusk 1-1. Request startup. Tusk 1-1. Cleared for startup. Wind 120 at 2 meters per second.
We're going to go ahead and get rid of that menu because we don't need it while we're performing our startup sequence. With that permission, we can go ahead and start the left engine. We do that by moving the throttle out of the off position to the idle position. We observe our master caution panel is going to show that we're in an engine start cycle, and we're going to see our engine 1 RPM start coming up. Now, because I have a HOTAS and because the stick is inconveniently right in the way of some controls, I like to click on the bottom of it and remove the stick from my view so that I can see the controls that are under it. Now, while that engine is starting, we're also going to activate our yaw and pitch SAS, which need electrical power. We're going to validate. I'm going to go ahead and move over here so that we can see a little better. We're going to validate that our boost wing pumps are all on wing. Boost pumps are on wing and main, and those are all on. We don't need our cross gate or cross feed. We don't have any wing or fuselage tanks, so those are off, and our fuel flow is in normal. Fuel flow switches are in normal. Our engines are in run. Those are actually things that you would check before attempting to start the engines, but that is the default for a cold start in DCS. As a matter of habit, we also like to check our warning lights, so I'm going to go ahead and adjust my view a little bit and hit the fire detect bleed air leak test. We see those lights come on. And we're going to test our signal lengths. Okay, all that's working as expected. We see over here on our panel that we are out of our engine start mode. So we'll go ahead and start our right engine again, moving the throttle out of the off position and into idle. Again, engine start light comes on. And we see our RPMs coming up. I'm going to hover around 25 when they're sitting in idle, which is exactly where we want them to be. We observe all of our gauges are in green areas. Okay, while that continues, we're going to go ahead and finish with our switches. going to go ahead and arm the seat. Normally you don't need that until the canopy is actually closed. We're going to turn our recorder on to record, activate our anti-skid. With clicking these switches, most of them are right clicks. The anti-skid is a left click for some reason. The Kiku, right click to turn on. JTRS, right click to turn on. IFFCC, this is basically your HUD. We're going to set that to test. And while we're here, we're going to go ahead and uncage the secondary attitude indicator. We see our HUD. I'm going to go ahead and blank the master caution. That's normal during startup. Engage pre-flight bit test. We're going to say yes. Now, built-in test errors are not simulated in this version. So this is really just a matter of immersion. If you don't want to do this, you can skip it. While that runs, we'll go ahead and turn on our iPads. I'm sorry, our multifunction displays. They're military iPads, basically. And we're going to hit the Load All button. This simulates a data cartridge that we would have entered with mission data.
Pull up.
Sorry. It's an
Altitude.
Voice message unit doing its alarm tests, interrupting me there. So the Load All button simulates loading our flight plan, our weapons load, and our head-mounted controls queuing system. We see that these are all dots. That tells me that the load is continued. If I go to CDU Repeater, we also see that our navigation has finished. Normally I do this a lot faster. I'm kind of going slow so that I can explain it and be clear and understood. When you do this process a few times, you will get very quick at it. Alright, there were no failures found in our bit test. We're going to go ahead and hit exit. And I'm going to select down to exit. And from there, we're going to go ahead and turn on the HUD. And we will see the normal HUD flight symbology. I will occasionally snap my view back, so we'll go from one spot and we'll jump to another. It'll look like this when I snap back. I'm also zoomed in so that you can see these more clearly. I don't normally zoom in this much. I'm going to go ahead and let's go ahead and finish the nav configuration. I normally do this after I do the weapon config, which I will show next, because it's still running at the time that I do my weapon config. So with the time equals 4.0.0.8 and INS nav ready flashing, we push the nav button. That tells us that we are good on internal navigation. Once we do that, we also come down here. I'm going to go ahead and lower my view so you can see these buttons a little better. And we switch from HARS to EGI navigation. And once we have done that, we're going to come over here to the autopilot panel. We see that our radar altimeter is already on. That is also a default position. You might see it as disengaged. I have a switch for it. And then EAC, we're arming that. The EAC switch will flip back if your SAS controls are not on, or if your nav alignment is not complete. I believe EGI needs to be turned on for that. Doesn't matter that I have a physical switch bound to it. The switch will flip back if it's not ready to be used. In which case, the physical switch, I'll have to flip it back and then rock it forward again. One of the other things that I make a habit of doing, because I fly multiplayer and we've had a variety of experiences with this, is I go ahead and configure my IFF panel. So my IFF panel is next to the autopilot panel. It is right here, IFF. We turn that to normal. code gets switched to hold and A, and then it'll flip back to A. We make sure that our mode 1 is on, mode 2 is on, mode 3A is on, mode C is on. I turn on mode 4. I also have a habit of setting a code, and the code that I use for me that is my transponder codes. This is my mode 1 code that identifies my aircraft mode 1 responses as number 40. In real life, this would all be briefed, and I would just be setting what was in the briefing. I have found on at least one occasion that if I did not set anything here and left it as 0000, that a Navy aircraft viewed me as hostile, and I was shot down by friendly fire for that. So it's now just a habit of mine to consider it part of immersion. Alright, I talked about weapon configuration. We're going to go back up here to the left MFD and DSMS page, which is our weapons. You'll see here I have a variety of things on board for our demo today. I have two different kinds of Mavericks. Those are the AGM-65s. I have a D and an H. I have one each of those. I have 3 Mark 82 dumb bombs, 3 Mark 82 air Ballute, which is retarded dumb bombs. I have a GBU-10, which it's identifying as being on laser code 1688. This is default. I'm not going to go over changing it because there is some disagreement about how it should be changed. The bombs technically are set on the ground by a screwdriver, so if they're loaded with 1688, your TGP should be on 1688. The only time you should change that is if you're lasing for somebody else, or if your bombs are set to a different code. If your bombs are set to a different code, you set your TGP to the code you're set to. There are plenty of good tutorials on that. I'm not gonna go over it because that's not the scope of this. I have a GBU-31, that is a JDAM, that is a GPS guided bomb, and a CBU-87, that is a cluster munition. So I'm going to go through the profile on these for a couple of reasons. We're going to have an order of battle here where I use different things in different orders. The first weapon we're going to be demonstrating is the Maverick, so I'm moving it to the top of the list. Then I plan to demonstrate the GBU-10, so I'm going to move it to the top of the list, or to under the Maverick. Then we are going to demonstrate the CBU-87. Then we're going to demonstrate the Mark 82. We're going to demonstrate the Mark 82 air Ballute, according to my notes. Then the Slick Mark 82. I don't have the GBU-31 on here. Alright, we're going to be modifying this procedure a little bit. We're going to put the GBU-31 as the second thing we demonstrate, and we're going to move the GBU-10 further down the list. As a matter of fact, the GBU-10 is going to be the second to last thing we demonstrate. And then the last thing, the actual second to last thing we demonstrate is going to be the M282. Those are the rockets. So there are also some things we want to configure here. So we're going to go to each profile. We have something to configure, and we're going to hit View Profile. I'm not going to change anything on the Mavericks. They're perfectly good by default. The GBU-31, there's actually nothing to change on that. The GPS guided bombs do all their things their own way. Go ahead and cycle down. CBU-87, I'm going to set that for nose fusing, which will give it the widest dispersion, and I'm going to release it using CCRP, continuously calculated release point. Go ahead and save that. I'm going to go down to the Mark 82 air Ballutes. We're going to release those in CCRP as well. And we're going to go down to the Mark 82 Slick. Everything there is good as tempted as I am to show ripple, we might show ripple. GBU 10. Okay, it is laser guided. Its default is to release CCIP. That's no good for us. We're going to release CCRP because that is the easiest way to handle laser guided bombs. And then the 70mm rockets, again, laser code 1688. CCIP is perfectly fine. We're going to release them single. And so that's all good. Go back to profile main. We've done all that. And go back to stat. Let's go ahead and zoom out here. Alright, we have a targeting pod on board. We see that on button 10. So we're going to go ahead and turn that on so it starts warming up, because we're going to need a little while for it. One of the things I make a point of doing, and I'm going to go to external for this to show you what's actually going on here, is move the controls. Make sure they move the way they're supposed to. Okay. We're going to lower the flaps. Make sure the flaps work. This is the landing position, takeoff position, and fully retract it. Air brakes. One of the other points of the air brakes is the HOTAS for the thumb switch for the air brakes actually locks forward when you push it forward. But it's momentary when you pull it to the rear. So one of the habits I have is doing the air brakes so that when I slam them when I push it forward again, it stays in the lock position, shutting those. We do not need the air brakes for takeoff. They are of no use to us. Alright, go back into the aircraft. One of the other things that I generally do is I come up here to the upfront controls and I say function waypoint, and that sets our CDU repeater to this menu, and then I hit waypoint. This will be relevant later in this flight, but for the moment I'm going to go ahead and leave that where it is. Actually, we're going to increment the waypoint so we can go through our mission plan real quick. We have a refuel waypoint, a target, an approach waypoint, and then a waypoint I didn't bother to name, but this is actually landing back here where we are. So, leaving that on initial position. The next thing to do is, of course, ask for permission. So we're going to ask permission to taxi to the runway.
Tusk 1-1. Request taxi to runway.
Tusk 1-1. Clear to taxi to runway 30. Path 2.
Okay, so that's 30 path 2. Dubai is a large and complicated airport, so I'm going to probably miss my exit a couple of times. Before we start rolling, we want to make sure we push our pinky button, nose wheel steering, and turn on nose wheel steering. And then... oh, I missed one of my takeoff steps. That's okay, we can handle it. So, it's not this step. What I'm doing is closing the canopy. Control C does work in that. It didn't used to for the A-10, but it does now. And then, unlike some people, we make a point of locking the canopy shut. Some steps that I missed that I'm going to do now. And go ahead and bring the formation lights brightness all the way up. Set them to flash. And then there is the pinky switch. I don't know if you're going to be able to see it. Yeah, there it is. The pinky switch on the throttle. We put that to the rear position. And what that does is it turns on, we'll go to external so you can see the lights. It turns on those lights. They're flashing because we are in an air terminal and it draws extra attention to us. So back inside. The other thing that I missed is turning on our countermeasure systems. So the procedure is turn all those switches on. Those are left clicks. If you right click them, they go up to reset, and then when you release them, they go back to the on position, so that's okay. And we roll this rocker over to standby. That is a right click. This will turn on our RWR that is going through its startup procedure. It also sets our chaff and flare dispensers is on. We've already gotten permission to roll, and we're taking up time here, so I'm going to go ahead and start rolling to takeoff point. Or to runway 30 right. Now, we're following the yellow line. Normally, a large aircraft would do a sweeping turn with that. We're actually pretty nimble on the ground, so we don't need to follow those lines like that. Look around when we're taxiing, make sure that we're not going to hit anything. In this particular mission, I know that we're not going to because there is only one other aircraft that I need to that is around, and that is our tanker, and it's already in the air. So we can basically just enjoy the view as we roll down the parking ramp. The other thing I'm looking for here is to make sure that I don't blow past where I need to be. I will be pausing occasionally and going to alternate views so that I can show you things of interest. I'm going to go ahead and stop. Actually, that is the turn I wanted to take, but I'm going to stop and show you how I knew that right here. Okay, across the way, you see that line of hangars. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in, and I'm not sighted in on it. That building over there, that little orange building behind the windsock with the small tower, is a glide slope. That is the touchdown point. The glide slope is part of the ILS. It sends the fly up, fly down signal. Where that it literally bounces the radio signal off of a pad next to the runway to give the actual touchdown point. So just in front of that antenna is that antenna tower. There's actually I think I saw 3 antennas on there, which means it's a capture effect. But that actually indicates where our touchdown point is. Okay, I was worried about this. I did make a wrong turn, so we're going to look really quick and make sure that we don't see anybody coming. Because
1-1, unable to clear for takeoff.
I've just entered the runway. I've just entered 30 left, and I'm back taxiing right now.
Task 1-1, unable to clear for takeoff.
And that's why he's screaming at me. So what I really wanted to do is I wanted to cross that runway. And there we are. And there's a median taxiway. Now I actually happen to be right where I wanted to be, which is the approach end of 30 right. So if you look at the map for Dubai, 30 right and 30 left are offset a little bit. Where 30 right is further forward than 30 left. And if we look over here, I keep looking down. That line of antennas right there is the localizer. Now that is the 1-2 localizer, but it is absolutely off the end of the runway of 30. So it's another indication that we're close to the end here. We see the markings at the end of the runway, and we see the airfield structures that we expect. This yellow and black dashed line that we see here, this is a hold short line. When you're on this when you're on the outside of the aerodrome, you'll see the solid lines will be closer to you. The dotted lines are closer to the aerodrome. The people on the dotted line side are always allowed to move to the solid line side. The people on the solid line side, which is us, are supposed to ask permission. So we are going to ask permission to enter. Now the way we do that in DCS is we request takeoff.
Tusk 1-1. Request takeoff.
On certain airports and certain runways, the hold short line is close enough to the point where the simulation detects you're actually requesting takeoff on the runway, and so it'll actually answer you at the hold short line. Nellis is one of those airports. I do a lot of my training at Nellis. Dubai, that's not the case. Dubai, they actually wait until I'm on the runway to answer. But it's still a habit. If I was flying multiplayer, I might key and ask permission to enter the runway. Make sure that I'm not going to run into anybody who's returning from mission or something.
Task 1-1. You are cleared for takeoff when ready. Climb 300 at QFE 29.91.
Okay, I'm lining up here. They have cleared me for takeoff. I'm going to go ahead and come to a stop. Alright, I'm going to set our flaps into the takeoff position. Let me see our flap indicator here. We see that it is down in the takeoff position. And we're going to go ahead and I'm going to zoom out a little bit so that I can see the engine gauges. I'm looking at the engine gauges as I push my throttle all the way up. Oh, one of the other things I'm going to do for your benefit here, I'm going to turn on my controls indication. I do not ever use this. But you see the throttle there. Throttle is all the way forward. Fans ready. I'm releasing the brakes. Now, as we start rolling, we want to try and keep it on center line. The thing is, nose wheel steering can be a problem at over 70 knots, so we're going to shut it off at or before 70 knots. Now we're steering with rudder authority. Occasionally we'll use a little bit of toe brake. Generally don't want to use toe brake if while you're trying to roll if you can avoid it, because that's not what it's for. Our V rotate is 150, which we're well above, so I'm going to go ahead and pull the nose back. And we're airborne. And I see we have positive rate, so I'm going to bring the gear up. And the gear is up. I'm now over 180 knots, so I'm safe to bring the flaps up. The A-10C has a automatic flap retractor when you get over 200 knots. I don't ever actually trust it because
altitude.
There's lots of circumstances where I don't want the flaps coming down even though I'm going lower speed. That altitude warning was because I was below 500 AGL. And there's our RWR. Now our RWR is kind of loud, so I'm going to go ahead and turn the volume down. Alright. Our load is unbalanced, so we're actually rolling a little bit, so I'm adjusting trim slightly to keep us level while I continue to climb. And there is lovely Dubai. Now that altitude warning was actually not about our actual altitude. It was because we passed over a building and our radar altimeter indicated that we were below 500 feet above the top of that building, which is why the voice messaging unit gave us a warning on it. Okay, you'll notice that I have not armed my weapons. I don't intend to at this time. Oh! We actually have a caution light had I actually bothered to look, and that is the APU generator. I left it on. So we're going to go ahead and shut off the APU generator, and then I'm going to shut off the APU, and we'll see that drop. The APU switch, of course, is over here by the throttle. We should have done that after the engines were started and while we were on the ground. The other thing I didn't do that we should have done when we started taxiing is turn on pitot heat. The pitot heat should not be left running while stationary in the A-10. It's not simulated, but in the real aircraft you can burn out your pitot if you're sitting still. One other thing I'm going to turn on is the helmet-mounted cueing system. And that's the switch right here. I'm going that forward. And when I look out there, you see the helmet mounted cuting system symbology. I am going to data management switch left long and shut that off because I don't need it right now. So it's on for when I need it later. Alright. Waypoint 1. Refueling. So the CDU, we can adjust the waypoints by typing the waypoint number we're interested in and hitting the OSB that goes to it. I want to see waypoint 1. The default keybinds for that is left control, left Windows, and then numpad numbers for numbers, or the letters on your keyboard. So pressing and holding control, left control and Windows, and then typing will put stuff on the scratch pad. That is default. I'm going to go ahead and clear that because I don't need that. The other thing that is handy is the left control, left Windows, and plus will increment your waypoint number when in the waypoint mode. Minus decrements it, brings it down. Now the other thing we like to do, because tankers move, the waypoint is stationary, is I'm going to go ahead and use the TACAN, which we tuned to 1x, which was our tanker frequency. I'm going to set that to TR, which is transmit receive. And if we look at our TACAN now, does not seem to be signaling. Okay. Interesting. So for some reason our TACAN is not responding. But our waypoint's good, so we're going to go ahead and fly to the waypoint. Move the TACAN here. Okay, we're going to make sure our TACAN receiver is actually working. Dial to a non-mobile TACAN, 99 X-ray. Okay, so our TACAN receiver is working. It is the tanker that does not appear to be responding correctly. So we'll go ahead and bring this down. We'll try anyway, because we do want that TACAN. Especially if we're doing this at night. There we go. Okay. It does that sometimes. So we are 9 miles away from the tanker. If we look at the TACAN indicator, I'm going to go ahead and bump up our waypoint. So the small needle, the thin needle, is the actual TACAN bearing. The diamond-shaped one is our waypoint. Okay, we're a lot closer to this than I wanted to be at this point, so we want to make sure that we're on the frequency for the tanker, which we set as 301, and that is on our UHF radio. We set 301. If you're using simple radios and you do things like bring up your communications menu, it will set the frequency that's there when you hit it. So we're going to tell them that we're around and we want some fuel. So tanker F6, intent to refuel.
Texaco 1-1, Tusk 1-1, request rejoin.
Tusk 1-1, Texaco 1-1, proceed to pre-contact at 15,000 at 260.
Okay. We're not anywhere near right yet. Well, we're getting close, but I'm not ready to say pre-contact, so I'm going to go ahead and close that menu. We see the tanker over there. If we look at our TACAN indicator, we'll see that he is moving right along. So we're going to go ahead and bring the throttles way up. We're going to haul this over a bit. He is flying a circular orbit, so we want to go ahead and match his circle. Don't worry about that course needle in the middle. Okay, you see him there. There we go. So the other thing I'm going to do, and I'm not going to show it to you, is I'm flipping my pinky switch on the throttle from aft to forward, which is default lighting. Default lighting is basic here I am lighting. This is daytime. We don't really need lights that much for the tanker to see us and understand we're here. But it is again one of those habits to get in. We are actually still not ready to refuel for a couple of reasons. One, we're very far away from the tanker from a refueling perspective, even though we're under a mile. We're not trimmed up very well. And our fuel door is closed. In the A-10, that fuel door is in the nose. Well, maybe he really did mean 260, because we're not catching him quite as quick as we wanted to. Now you notice I'm not flying directly at the tanker. That's because the first thing I want to do is I want to get close to him and get information with him before I risk hitting him. So I actually fly to the inside. There we go. I actually try to fly to the inside of him, and it gives me an easy way to bail out of the contact if I wind up approaching him too fast. I got some time here, so I'm going to go ahead and bring my view down, and I'm going to hit the fuel door open lever, and then we'll snap back. Now I know he said 260, but he's really going to be doing about 180 if he's 180 knots indicated when he's refueling an A-10, because we can't refuel at 260 knots. We can barely do 260 knots, especially with any kind of ordnance on board, and it is not at all unusual to refuel with a full load of ordnance before going into the mission, which is exactly what we're doing here. Now you notice the light on the right side of the dash, the HUD rather, says ready. That is actually our fuel door. Alright, so this guy is also maneuvering as part of his orbits. He's trying to get to the orbit he wants. We're doing 195 and we're gaining on him. So we're going to slow down a little bit. We're going to trim up, make sure that we're flying level. Now the tradition is aircraft wanting to fuel are on the left side of the tanker. Aircraft that have refueled are on the right side of the tanker. So we're going to approach on the left side. And as I said before, I'm actually going to bring us up into formation on the tanker before we even attempt to refuel. This gives me an out if things start going wrong. It lets me make sure that I'm in the proper formation with him, in the proper speed, attitude, etc. And then I'm trimmed up well. So it looks like our speed is going to be about 181. because at 181 I'm not really gaining on him, and at 182 I start gaining on him. So we're going to go ahead and trim up here to that speed. Okay, now that we're in close, one of the things I'm going to do flying flat panel, I find it's a lot easier to refuel if I've got more field of view, so I'm going to go ahead and zoom out a little bit. Yeah, the instruments are a little harder to see, but that's okay. I don't really need the instruments. I need to be seeing the plane. The other thing I'm going to do, that's actually a little too much. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to actually notch my vision up a little bit. This will become a little more evident why when we get closer to the boom. Okay, I feel like we are probably trimmed up correctly, and we've got our speed pretty good. Looks like he's actually doing about 178, so we're going to go ahead and call him and tell him we're ready. So again, comm menu, F1, ready pre-contact.
Ready pre-contact.
Cleared contact.
Okay, he's cleared his contact. That means we're going to go ahead. That means, first of all, he's going to accelerate to the real speed he's going to do, which is going to be 180. So yeah, I'm flooring to catch up. I know that with this tanker. Okay. And the thing we're mostly concentrating on here is being steady against the aircraft, not the boom. Fly formation on the aircraft, not the boom. We want to have constant speed, we want to be steady. Okay, he's picked the boom up, so we are actually going to have to move up a little bit as we get a little closer. And the hard thing to keep steady is actually our speed. If you look at my instruments, the throttle's moving constantly. Okay, we're almost in the position. Come on. There we go.
Contact.
Yep.
Return pre-contact.
Missed. So when we had the disconnect light, I go ahead and hit the nose wheel steering button. It resets our receptacle. Again, we're going to move in here.
Contact. You're taking fuel.
Right. The thing that I'm looking at here, I'm trying to hold the aircraft in a steady position. That is to say, I want the tanker to stay in the same spot on my window, and I'm looking at the boom, and I want to keep the green as best as I can in that collar. As we start getting further away, the green will slide out, it'll go to yellow. I apply a little more throttle, and remember it's a little sluggish. After the yellow is red, it's the same thing when closing in on it. As we close in on it, we slow down. Now, this is not as easy as I am making it look. This is a top skill in DCS, and what you're seeing here is actually the result of hundreds of hours of practice. It is a thing that you're supposed to brag about when you do it successfully the first time on Facebook. Oh, yeah, and that said, I almost just ran into the tanker because I got a little heavy on the throttle. There's lots of tips on how to do this well. The thing I recommend is practice formation flying, practice formation flying, practice formation flying, fly formation on the aircraft, not the boom. Have a good field of view so you can see what's going on. React quickly but surely with your throttle. React before with the throttle. React before the problem happens. So like we're getting close, so I'm already backing off the throttle before I get into the red. As we start extending out, I start adding throttle to keep that from losing. as we take on fuel, we get heavier, so we do need to be a little heavier on the throttle to stay close, or to stay in the refuel envelope. So the refuel envelope, though, is defined by the airplane, not by the boom. So we're flying formation on the tanker, the aircraft itself. I'm looking at where the wings join the body, and I'm trying to keep that in the same part of my window. For distance, I'm looking at the boom. That's what the green, yellow, and red markings are for. And we are about to get transfer complete because we are at 10,000 pounds of fuel now.
Transfer complete. Disconnect.
Alright, that disconnect means back off. Now I am going to throttle all the way up, and I'm going to come up on this wingtip. We wouldn't normally do that on a tanker. You would actually just descend away, which we're going to, now that we're away from it, I'm going to go ahead and peel off of it. And then I'm going to come down here, I'm going to close our fuel door. Alright. And I'm bring my view back in so I can see for the purposes of our actual target range mission. Alright. We see that we are only 18 miles away from our target range, which is Abu Masa. I've laid out some targets for us to take on. And we need to get some airspeed here before I... So go ahead and trim out so we've got some level flights so I can get some airspeed going. And then we're going to do what's called fencing in. So fencing in, we turn off our lights. That is the pinky switch on the throttle to the center position. We are going to activate our master arm. We are going to turn on our laser. So that I don't have to worry about it later, I will also turn on the gun. If I know that I'm not going to be using the gun, or probably won't use the gun, I'll leave it in the safe mode. Because unlike other aircraft, the A-10 will fire the gun if you touch the trigger, if you pull the trigger. Alright, it's telling me the CCIP invalid. That's the continuously calculated impact point is invalid. Its default mode is in gun, so I'm going to push the mode button, and I'm going to, yeah, we'll just leave it there in CCIP. Over on this MFD, I'm going to go ahead and bring up the target pod, which we see is on, but it's in standby. We're also going to roll our countermeasures. I like to put them in semi, which is the third position, showing here. Semi means it will automatically detect the type of countermeasure program that I need, but I still decide whether or not to use countermeasures. If we go to full auto, it will send off countermeasures when its system thinks so. It needs to, and manual is fully manual. Okay. We are now fenced in. That is, we are ready for combat. Except for one thing, and that is our Mavericks. Our Mavericks are not aligned. Other airframes, you have to do this alignment on the ground. In the A-10, they're bore sighted automatically, so you just turn them on. That is the EO button. You set that to on. That'll start a countdown. It takes them 3 minutes. We are 5 minutes away from our target, so that should be plenty of time. One of the things I also like to do, and here's a little tip for you, is I like to put the Maverick display on both MFDs, and we do that. This button, stat, is not really useful in simulation. So we press and hold that button, and that'll bring up the display program and let us pick whatever we want to go there. And for that, we're going to select Mav, and then we pick the button that we want the Maverick display on. We hit it again, we're going to see the Maverick display. You'll see they're both the same. I don't need them on both MFDs, it's just handy if it's over here if I roll it quickly. So I'm going to go back to TGP on the right MFD and Maverick on the left MFD while the Maverick is cycling. We're going to come out of standby, we're going to go to air-to-ground mode, which is, of course, everything you need an A-10 for is air-to-ground. Okay, we're going to make the TGP our SOI, sensor of interest, and the switch aft to roll it around to our steer point. So here we see Abu Masa Air Base. I'm panning to show you the airbase, or the island, and the things that are on, and sort of the things that are on. Now our targeting point, our steer point, is actually, I've turned a little too far away, so I'm going to go ahead and turn back. So our TGP right now is actually looking at the aircraft. If we look over here, we can see the head of it there next to the two AIM-9 Sidewinders. It is actually looking straight at the airplane, which is not very helpful. Okay, I said I turned off the helmet mounted queuing system by using data management left long. We're going to go ahead and turn it on right now, same way. There we go. And we see that queue box is where the TGP is looking. We see that we have an aim point that is marked target. That is our actual waypoint. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom in. Well, I'm going to bring it back to the aim point. I'm going to zoom in here, and I'm going to start looking for targets. Now I know from our briefing that we have a line of tanks right next to the runway. So we were on the runway for our waypoint. And there's a tank. So we're going to go ahead and demonstrate Maverick weapon systems. Maverick weapon systems. We have selected a tank with our TGP. Go ahead and switch that to point. Zoom in on it. Get it. Well, it'll auto grab it. That's fine. We're going to go target management switch up long to set it as a target. We can go to our DMS page and we can select the Maverick here with an OSB, or we can make the HUD SOI and use data management left and right short to select weapons. So we're going to go right short, and it's going to be the AGM-65D IR warhead, because that's what we said would be the first profile that we would select. Alright, with that, we'll go ahead and conical hat switch back over to Maverick. We're going to put our... So one of the things that we see here is that even though we're heading straight at the target, it's all white. And if we rock our boat switch fore and aft for black hot or white hot or CCD, we're going to see nothing but fog, really, and now we see the tank. Now the reason that that was the case is there is a cloud. We're now looking between those clouds. So we have that selected. That is our target. Up long. Now if we use hat switch forward short, we change our zoom. If we set it long, we adjust our Mavericks to take that as a target. Now it's outside of our limits right now, the gimbal limits of the Maverick, and there we go. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm slowing down to take this in. Alright, you see the Maverick there. Now I'm going to switch sensor of interest, SOI, over to the Mavericks. I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to TMS up short. Okay, we have a lock, firing, rifle. And there goes our AGM-65D. If I do this video properly, I'll go to an external view and we'll show that hitting the target. Okay. Meanwhile, I'm going to select the AGM-65H. I did that by making the HUD soy, DMS right short, and that selected the next weapon profile, which in this case was the AGM-65H. There we go. Okay, that tank is demolished. Now, we can do this targeting, and it's worth getting good at it by leaving, if you've got a bunch of Mavericks, by leaving it on the Maverick display, or leaving the Maverick page as soy, and using that to do what I'm doing now, which is selecting a target. Okay, I'm going to go ahead, I've selected that target, TMS long to make that the target, and then China has switched forward long to make the Maverick aim at it. We are really kind of too close because of the time I took and spent approaching this. So I'm going to go ahead and give us some distance by flying directly away from the tank. Stall warning horn. I often say the stall warning horn in the A-10 is a suggestion. Mavericks are good weapons to use for tanks because they have heavy warheads, and tanks are notoriously hard to break open. So of the targets that we have on Abu Masa in our shooting range, we have tanks, we have trucks, we have APCs, BTR-80s, and then we have some loose infantry on foot. The loose infantry on foot actually have a MANPADS with them. It is Russian equivalent of a Stinger in this case. Now, they are set as targets. They are not going to shoot at me unless I've misconfigured something in the mission. So if you are flying this mission yourself and you just want to use them as targets, they're there. You don't really have to worry about them shooting at you. Like I said, unless I've misconfigured the mission somehow, and I'm pretty sure I have not. So none of the other targets are worth wasting a Maverick on. So we're going to use the Maverick on the tank, which we've already lined it up. We've already set it. We've already told it. We've already slaved the Maverick to the TGP. I'm going to go ahead and bring the Maverick page up as soy. And you see the green box that goes around it. It says that's soy. You see that it has locked on that point on the ground. You see the bracket that says that we're in range, but it's not flashing, so we haven't locked it, because I haven't. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in and see that we're pointed at something. TMS up short. There we go. Flashing cross. Weapon release. Rifle. Rifle is a brevity code that means I have launched a guided missile. So Mavericks are rifle. Unfortunately, I think that cloud is going to be in our way. Yeah, I'm going to try and get past it real quick. Oh, maybe. Because we want to see this guy get hit. Yeah, I might not. Oh, there we are. Alright, we saw him get hit. The call on that is Shack. We observed the destroyed. It was a T-55. Trimming up. You'd be trimming in the A-10 pretty much constantly, because every weapon you fire, your balance is going to change slightly. As your airspeed changes, your balance is going to change. So that was our Mavericks. You may have noticed that the H has a different color display than the D. The D is infrared, has a longer range. The H is slightly shorter range and is a regular CCD camera. Since we have no Mavericks left, and if we look over there, you'll see the empty pylon on the wing and the empty pylon on the other wing. I'm going to come off the Maverick page and I'm going to put it on the DMS page. The DMS page is where I generally like to have my weapons, or my display, after I'm out of Mavericks, because then I can see quickly and clearly what I'm selecting. So I'm going to come up soy to the HUD, DMS right short, and we've brought up the GBU 31, and we see that on the HUD, we see that on the DMS. You go back to the TGP as soy. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate helmet mounted queuing. First thing I'm going to do is zoom out on this. Sorry, I was trying to buddy lace. Now I could move this around and hunt for targets, and I will be doing that. But the other thing that I can do, because I know that there's BMPs there, and I know that because of the graphic that I should have showed earlier, I'm intentionally not aiming there at the moment. I'm going to bring helmet mounted queuing up. Now, helmet mounted queuing, I can put. It's easier with VR and head tracking and all those other things. I do this a little bit. I can put the cross right where I want the TGP to look, and with the TGP soy, DMS right long will bring that to the thing. Now, because I know I'm going to that parking lot, you notice I moved it around while using the helmet-mounted queuing system. And since you can see the MFD in the other side, you see that it also lined up there. So I'm now going to snap to, I'm going to zoom way in, I'm going to pick one of these BTR 80s. Let's see that's there. I'm going to go to point. I'm going to make it a target. If I go here, you'll see that the wedding cake moved to it. That set the GBU 31 GPS guided bomb to hit there. As long as I don't designate another target, that's where the GBU 31 is going to hit, regardless of what I do with the TGP, where I look around, whether or not I can see that target. Now, the GBU 31 is also 2,000 pounds, so I am going to adjust this a little bit. I'm going to put it here. I'm not actually going to hit a BTR 80. I'm going to gain a little distance from the target, and I'm going to bring up some altitude, because this thing is awesome at altitude. Now we're going to go ahead and turn inbound. Like I said, this is a day at the target range, so being nice and lazy about this, we're not really working to move very fast. I may demonstrate some fast targeting later, depending on how this portion goes. Alright, what we're trying to do though is we're bringing along, we can see a steer line. So that vertical line is a steer line, which we're now right on. The other thing we'll see on the left side, you see a caret inside of a bracket. Since we're inside that bracket, we can drop at any time. We're about to go out of it, so I'm actually not going to drop. One of the problems with it's not really a problem, but one of the things to remember with the JDAM, GPS guided munitions, is they take a long time to drop. When you actually press the weapon release button, you're going to press and hold the weapon release button until the GPS guided munition drops. And you'll know that because it'll flash and turn white on the DPMS page. I'll show that when it happens. If you do not hold until it drops, the weapon will hang. It will stay on the pylon, it will not drop, and you cannot. The only way to get rid of it is to jettison it. So you want to be sure when you're going to drop GPS guided munitions, especially the GBU 31s, that you have a long time that you can fly straight and level and hold that weapon release button. Failure to do so will impact your aircraft. You'll have basically high explosive ballast waiting for some guy with an igla to shoot you and blow you completely out of the sky because you got 2,000 pounds of extra high explosive on board. Okay, we're now well outside the bracket, so we're going to go ahead and make a run again. Turning inbound. Look. See, our wedding cake is still there. If we move the TGP around, actually it is moving the wedding cake. So we actually want to leave the TGP where it was. Okay, we should be coming up. There's our steering line. Alright. This being a longer run, okay, we're going to keep our flight path indicator in the middle of that steering line. The A-10 is not very sensitive to this. The GBU 31 is not very sensitive to this. If it's even close, it'll correct and hit. Alright, we're coming up into the bracket. There's our warning. There's our bracket. See, manual release is lit. We are pressing and holding weapon release. And there we go. You see the white happened. That means that it is gone. If we're not able to see it because it's under us, but if I let go of the stick, you'll see we're rolling. That's because we lost a lot of weight. We lost 2,000 pounds. How to lose 2,000 pounds in 3 seconds of a press. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and zoom out. We'll leave it at that magnification. GBU 31 is falling. I do not have to keep the target in sight. I'm just doing that so that we can watch it. The GBU 31, there we go. And we see 3 secondary explosions, 3 fires. We have destroyed 3 BTR-80s. Oh, I'm sorry, they're critical damaged, so they're actually on fire. We didn't actually hit any of them, we just had to land close with 2,000 pounds of explosives. Alright, HUD to soy, switching up to the next weapon. I said a CBU-87. CBU-87 going to be released in continuously calculated release point. CBU-87 we are going to use for infantry. It is really good at light lightly armored, unarmored vehicles, really. So infantry, trucks. It can kill an APC. It will generally not kill a tank, a proper tank. Alright, so go back here, and I said we were going to show. I was going to show you searching for targets. So here I'm searching for targets. Now they're hard to see, but I happen to know from the briefing. There's infantry. Now if I zoom in, I see, oh my gosh, infantry with a long pole on his shoulder. Now that is actually a Stinger, and if we look over here, you see his buddy with more Stingers. So this guy is actually dangerous to us. So that is our guy we're going to target. I've selected him as point. I have TMS up long to select him as target. I have the CBU 87 selected as my armament, and that profile. Even though the profile is continuously calculated release point, we can alter what we want to use by pushing our master mode button. So I have that as CCRP, so that's what it's going to be by default, and I'll show that by turning. But if I hit the master mode button, I could cycle through master modes. 4.4 miles, yeah, we got space. Now we're also at 20,000 feet. We are effectively outside the range of an Igla SAM. So even if he were going to shoot at us, which he won't because he's a target, not a live unit, we would be outside of his capability to hurt us. Okay, there we go. So I might not have been, because of our altitude, I might not actually be as far away as I need to be. Yeah, we're actually not as far away as I need to be. Oh, quiet. Alright, so we're gonna go ahead and fly over him, and then we'll turn around and come back. So this is the problem with, it's not really the problem, this is the thing you have to keep in mind with continuously calculated release points, is you need enough space to make a run at it. Now I could have done all kinds of fancy aerobatic stuff and dropped my nose down and essentially dive bombed and still made a CCRP bomb run. But that's not really the point of what we're doing here today. What we're doing here today is showing you what it looks like when we do it sort of the proper way. So while we're getting some distance, let's enjoy the view. These wonderful new clouds. And way over there you can see the Burj Khalifa. Right where my queue is. Okay, 6 miles, that should be far enough. We're going to go ahead and... Now you may notice that I also am intentionally turning away from... When I start my turns, I'm turning right, but I'm turning away from the direction that is indicated as the closest turn to target. The reason I'm doing that is because by turning away, it actually gives me a little more distance. And what I'm trying to do with these maneuvers is open up the distance so that I can easily make my CCRP runs, bombing runs. Alright, there we go. There's our CCRP steer line. You see, different from the JDAM, the CCRP steer line has that Q on it. That Q, when it crosses, I'm going to maneuver here so you can see it, when it crosses into that point in the middle of in that circle there, that's the actual release. So what I want to do is I want to fly with these lines as close as possible to each other as we approach our release point. This is the continuously calculated release point. Alright, as that starts dropping, I'm going to get ready to hit weapon release. As it crosses down in the circle, I'm going to press and hold weapon release.
Pull up! Pull up!
I want that cue to go through the middle, as close to the middle of my bomb cursor as possible, which is what you saw there. And when it crossed through the middle, you saw that the CBU 87 released. Alright, on our soy here, I'm going to go ahead and zoom out. At this magnification and at this altitude, you'll see that infantry are actually very hard to see. Black hot and white hot don't really help much. Oop, there we go. That is our CBU 87 absolutely demolishing the SA-18 IGLA MANPAD installation. There was also an RPG in there. Had we been in a helicopter, that would have been a little more dangerous to us if we got down low. Alright, on to the next weapon. The next weapon is our Mark 82 air Ballute, which we also have set in CCRP. For that, we're going to go after the truck park. The truck park is at the other end of the runway. We know that from our briefing image. The trucks are a little easier to see. So we're going to aim at one in the middle. We're selecting that as our target. I'm pulling back on the throttles and I'm going to start descending here, because the air Ballute is really designed to, it's 500 pounds, so we don't want to be too low, but it's really designed to be released straight and level at sort of high speed from low altitude. We are losing altitude fast. There is our steer line. Just like the other CCRP weapons, we're going to keep the steer line. Okay, 8,000 feet should be enough. Okay, so we came off target because we passed through center line. There we go, getting close. Drop one. There we go. Okay, we actually hit with that. Now, we've got an incoming message from JTAC. I'm going to move through quickly here. We have a location of a site that we want to deal with. So, the way we do that is we have our waypoint, which I'm going to increment up to target. We're in latitude, longitude. We're going to switch that to MGRS because we've been given, or UTM, because we've been given MGRS coordinates. Left control, left window, letters, CP, because that's what it gave us, and then numpad for 0352165607. JTAC will read you those, and the good idea to have a scratch pad to write it down quickly, or if you can type quickly like I did, you can put it in. Now, it is the bottom button. I know it looks like it's the one up from that. It's actually the bottom leftmost button. We hit that, and now we have changed our waypoint 2. If we look, you saw our waypoint 2 was in the middle of the airfield before. Now we've changed it to this point on the north of the island. You see that little yellow box there. We go back to our TGP, make TGP soy, by the way, the amount of time that that's displaying there, that's a lot longer than JTAC usually gives you. That's just up there so that you have the time to see it, see what I typed. We bring China Hat back long, and what you see is that or what you kind of didn't see is that our box moved to our waypoint that we had set. This I find is the fastest and easiest way to handle JTAC assignments with that, is to set a waypoint up, and I'll usually add a waypoint and label it JTAC if I know I could be using JTAC, and I'll go to that waypoint, and that's where I'll input the MGRS coordinates. Alright, so we could attack this with the air Ballute weapons, but we already demonstrated those. So let's go on to our next weapon, which is the Mark 82 slick bomb with being fired with CCIP, that's continuously calculated impact point. We don't need quite as much of a lead-in with continuously calculated impact points, but we still want a little bit of a run. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to line up on the target. I'm going to give us some distance so I can talk about this before we actually do it. And we also don't actually need the TGP for continuously calculated impact point, because we're actually going to be aiming with the HUD. So I'm giving us a little bit of distance so I've got some space to talk about this. We're going to drive toward the target. We're going to start diving toward the target so that we can see where the bomb is going to hit when we release it. There's going to be a line that comes up that's a fall line. We're actually going to aim with that fall line. We're going to put that on the target, which is one reason why I use the TGP, because it'll be easier to see the target this way. And then there's going to be a cursor, bomb cursor, that is the impact point. When the bomb cursor reaches the target, that's when we release. And we do it immediately. There's not a lot of press and hold unless we're doing ripple. If we're doing ripple where we're dropping multiple bombs, we press and hold. I am turning inbound now because at 6 miles I think I've got plenty of space for this. The dive incline is going to be fairly steep. Bombs tend to release at about 45 degrees. So I'm using that pointer to show me where the target is, and if I start descending, you see on the HUD where my target's indicated. That steer line, you see it's dashed. So we are steering, or the fall line rather is dashed. That means that the bomb cursor is off the HUD. If I press the release button now, it will miss. So I am actually steering past the target because I don't want to run into it with the nose of the plane. As we get close, and mind you, I'm trying to keep the fall line on the target. Alright, there we go. We're going to see the pipper coming up. See the bomb pipper coming up there. And when it is on the target, we will release. And then we immediately start pulling up. And I'm going to come around and see how good we are. JTAC only wanted that one target destroyed. We did it. That was the priority target. That was the radar that guides the rest of the Silkworm site. So they have directed us that we may depart. We're not going to. We've got more weapons to do. Now I'm looking here to see crater. And I don't see a crater next to it, which means I probably hit it dead center. That is, I'm going to call that good shooting, because normally with a 500-pound bomb like that, on a flimsy little thing like a Silkworm radar, I could hit near it and it would have destroyed it, and which is why the CCIP was perfectly acceptable. CCIP can be deadly accurate if you get that lineup right, and if you get the release right when the pipper's on the target, it is not that much of an accident that I hit it perfectly. It's, you know, I'm happy. I'm not surprised, but I'm happy. Okay, we have more weapons to demonstrate, though. So, what do we feel like? Well, let's see what the next weapon we're going to demonstrate is. And according to our plan, it is the GBU-10, which is a 2,000-pound laser-guided bomb. Alright, what do we want to immolate with a 2,000-pound laser-guided bomb? And we've got other Silkworm things there, but I've got something planned for those. Let's come back over here to our tanks. Now, we've got to find them. So, you'll see what I'm doing is I'm actually searching. And I'm searching the whole island for... Well, that's a city. We don't want to bomb that at the moment. I mean, we don't want to bomb that. It's a civilian installation. It's technically a war crime. We try to avoid war crimes here. Incidentally, using a cluster munition in a populated area, there's our runway, using cluster munition in a populated area is a war crime. Do not use cluster munitions on civilian buildings under any circumstances. They're worse than landmines when it comes to being left behind in battlefields. Submunitions have a nasty habit of not all exploding, and there's our tanks. They have a nasty habit of not all exploding, and they have more powerful punch than landmines. They will do things like vaporize livestock and humans that accidentally step on them. They're not actually designed to go off like that. However, their fuses are also really, really twitchy. So, yeah, CBUs of any kind in civilian areas, not okay. Again, DCS, simulation, do as you see fit. Alright, so we have a tank as a target. You see we zoomed in a whole lot. I am selecting the tank as a target. I am gaining altitude because when dropping laser-guided bombs, we want to be more than 10,000 feet above the target. General rule of thumb is, well, you want to be more than 12,000 feet above the target. General rule of thumb is if your altitude is, for any map in DCS, if your altitude is above 15,000 ASL, unless you're shooting at something in mountains, dropping in something in mountains, you're probably okay. So we're going to go ahead and for laser-guided bombs. So I am coming up to about 15,000. Alright, we are 3 miles away. That's a little close, especially since 3 of those miles are straight down to it. So we're going to go ahead and open this up again. LGBs can be dropped CCIP. We prefer to drop them CCRP because that is the point of the laser, is to make up the difference in accuracy. CCIP is more accurate than CCRP for unguided munitions. As you saw, we managed to bullseye that radar installation. If we looked at the trucks, we'd probably see craters that are near them, and we will. We'll go look at the trucks in a minute, and we'll see that I didn't hit them anywhere near as accurately as I'm about to hit this tank. All right. So the other thing we want to make sure is our laser is armed. Okay, the laser's not actually on right now. I'm looking at the TGP display. I see where it says INRP. That means inertia point, and then it says LM. That L means laser. We have other modes. Laser's the only one we care about. Okay. So, because we are going to be using our laser on our TGP to aim at that. we start off like any other CCRP bomb run. We line up on our steer line. Again, the A-10 and laser-guided munitions, this is incredibly forgiving. It does not have to be precise. And we do our release, just like we did before. Now the next thing we want to do is we want to turn on our laser. That is the nose wheel steering button. You see that the L on the TGP started flashing. We are not auto-lasing, we are manual lasing. Now you may notice that I adjusted my aim point. This is a 2,000-pound bomb. I don't actually have to hit this tank directly at all. But more than that, I'm aiming at the commander's hatch on this T-55. This 2,000-pound bomb is going to go through the commander's hatch. Okay, instantaneous destruction. You see that the crater is larger than the vehicle. But that laser warhead went through the commander's hatch. That is how accurate these munitions are. Okay, next up, laser-guided rockets. Okay, tanks are actually unsuitable targets for laser-guided rockets. So remember I said I had a plan for that Silkworm site? I'm going to go ahead and swing back to the Silkworm site. Okay, 70mm Hydra rockets have an effective range of about 2 miles when aimed CCIP. As laser-guided munitions, they have an effective range of about 5 miles if you've got altitude. So, here we are. We have one of the launchers lined up. Now, one of the things you want to be careful with the A-10 targeting pod is you do not want to put your straight ahead on your aim point, because it does have a blind spot right there. Alright, we're under 5 miles. I'm going to go ahead and turn on the laser and fire one rifle. And you may see that it bent. Once it's on the way, all I need to do is keep the laser on it, on the target, and you will see that that 70mm nail will hit that guy. There we go, dead on, right where the laser was. I'm going to go ahead and... okay, so the next thing I wanted to demonstrate was using rockets in CCIP mode. So just because I have a laser doesn't mean I have to use it. You can load Hydra rockets that do not have laser guidance packages. The laser guidance packages are actually add-ons to the Hydra rocket. The Hydra rocket dates way back, and so laser guidance wasn't a thing when they were invented. The A-10 is capable of carrying unguided rockets, so I'm going to demonstrate firing, even though I have laser guidance packages, and you'll see that I'm missing one rocket because I fired it. It's capable of firing the unguided ones, and so I'm going to fire one as though it was unguided, and I'm going to attempt to take out a truck. So I'm swinging around, giving us some distance on the truck park, which is that little bit right there. I'm leaving my TGP aiming at the Silkworm site. Now this is going to get a little dicey a little quick, so I'm going to move in fast here. Okay, there we are, we're lined up. Hydra rocket.
Pull up! Pull up!
There we go, I hit it with the second one. Did not destroy the truck. Probably it was a near miss. We're going to go ahead and lose some speed here. The siren's going to go off as I'm intentionally shedding energy to slow down. And we will come in low and slow over the truck park and see how badly my aim was. Okay, so one thing you see, that one crater next to the blown up truck.
Altitude.
That's from that air Ballute that we dropped. We actually did miss by a bit. Oh, our Hydra rocket didn't miss by that much, but it went under the... Oops, there we go. That was actually the stall warning horn telling me I was going too slow for the attitude we had. The A-10 is very forgiving. All I did was touch the throttle a little bit. Alright, so I left my TGP on the Silkworm site, and I said there was a reason, and the reason is I'm going to show you a really cool thing you can do with the Hydra rockets, because so far this flight has gone pretty well, and I'm saving the two of the coolest things for last. If you work quickly, and I'm not going to be able to explain with quite as slowly as I have been on what I'm doing, but I will try and talk through it as I do it. If you work quickly from a long enough range with the laser guidance package on the Hydra rockets, you can laser guidance hit more than one target on your way by. And you do this by picking one, firing at maximum range, keeping the laser on it until it hits, immediately move the laser without turning it off, immediately move the laser to another target and fire another. If you get a really good run and you get really good range and you have a lot of targets that are close to each other, you could potentially get off 3 or even 4. I've never done 4, but theoretically it's possible. You could get off 3 or even 4 Hydra rockets and kill 3 or 4 lightly armored targets. The Hydra is really good for lightly armored or unarmored targets. So the Silkworm missiles, which have fuel and everything else that will go up if they're hit by explosives. Alright, so we're going to plan this run. I'm going to pick the targets that we're going to hit. Alright, so that guy's dead, so we're not going to hit him. Sorry. So we're going to try and hit those 3 launchers. We're going to start with the nearest one. I'm going to zoom in. Now we are 7 miles away, so we got lots of room and time. Okay, the other thing that I'm doing is I'm zooming out. Just enough zoom to have the target so that I can see where the next one is. Yeah, that's the trick. Alright. Like I said, it's going to be about 5 miles or so. Trim up so I don't have to worry about flying as much. Okay, and I'm going to bring him back on the throttle so we can slow down. Turning on the laser, and I'm going to leave the laser on for the entire strike. Firing 1. Now we wait. This is the interminable part, is where we're just sitting and waiting for that to hit, because we can't move the laser until it hits. And maybe we can, maybe it'll hit, but since I'm leaving the laser on, if I start swinging it around, I'm going to tell that rocket to go somewhere else. We're waiting. There we go. Immediately go to the next target. On it. Firing. got it. Where is it? Shit. We're gonna miss on that one. Yep, we missed. We missed because I had a gimbal roll on the targeting pod, and we actually wound up hitting behind the target because the TGP came off of the target while we were on our roll in. Had that not happened, and it happens sometimes. It's once your TGP starts gimbal rolling, it tends to do it a lot. So we're going to go ahead and throw it back in standby, which recenters everything, and we'll go back to air to ground. Had we not had that happen, we probably would have made that third shot. I was lined up pretty well to do it. CCIP. We did miss. We didn't miss by much though. I know that because I saw where the rocket hit. And then if we go over here, we can see there's the two we just killed. And if I look, yeah, I think that's actually where we hit, is that little greasy spot right there. So we didn't miss by much, but we did miss. Okay. So that's cool with all those weapons. We've shown laser guidance, we've shown we've shown GPS, we've shown all that cool stuff. What you really want to see with the A-10, you know what it is. Middle of the screen. I switched my master mode over to guns. I'm going to go ahead and use the helmet mounted queuing system, and I'm going to select, I'm going to bring my TGP around to aim at what we're going to take on with the guns. Oops. You remember what was right there, right? D55. There is some debate about the effectiveness, the real effectiveness, of the JAU 8 Avenger cannon. It is not actually able to kill a main battle tank when fired at the front armor. The front armor of any kind of modern main battle tank is way too angled and way too thick, even for the 30mm grenades that you're lobbing at it, to have an effective kill. Don't get me wrong, it'll do all kinds of damage. It'll rip off antennas, it'll destroy sighting systems, it will be a mess, and it will not be a good time for people in the tank. You might get a penetrating hit on a T-90, it's possible. But it will not, with surety, kill a modern main battle tank from the front. I'm not lining up on the front. T-55 fired at from the side by the JAU-8 Avenger cannon will die. You see that little black spot in the middle of my HUD? I'm going to go ahead and zoom in. I'm going to make this easy on myself. How's that sound? Okay, I designated it so it would be easier to see. You see it right there. You see the two pips? They are two different kinds of rounds. The lower one is the heavier round. That's the one we actually want to hit. Now that we're inside of 1 mile.
Pull up! Pull up!
%49 damage on one pass. Now, had I started firing a little further away and scored hits, that wouldn't have been 49%. That would have been 98%. That would have been critical damage. We only fired 200 rounds. We have 968 30mm grenades all sitting underneath me Because as you know, the ammunition is right behind and below the pilot. The gun is below the pilot. And we have 968 combined munition, 30mm sabot, tracers, armor-piercing, incendiary rounds, all saying, "Ooh, ooh, ooh, my turn, my turn!" And yes, it is. Now we got kind of jerky when I was zoomed in, so I'm not going to zoom in this time. I am aiming with the HUD, I'm not aiming with the TGP.
Pull up! Pull up!
Oh, we're getting really jerky here. Probably has to do with me with the recording.
Altitude! Altitude!
Alright, so we're going to make one more pass at this, because I'm going to demonstrate that it can in fact be done. And you may have noticed in the damage assessment window that it was saying 84%. If you got any doubt that I can't do another 14% damage with 690 rounds, well, let's just go ahead and lay that to rest. Oh yeah, you see the cheetah pattern we left around it. We missed a lot. So when I was rehearsing this mission, I didn't have that kind of problem, and so I think it's probably my recording that is actually causing my frame rate loss. Not a big deal. Alright, the other thing we're going to do with the cannon is once we're on target, I'm going to do half to press on the trigger. That'll stabilize my flight.
Pull up! Pull up!
Here we go, critical damage. And here's all our jerkiness. Come on. And that plume of smoke is our critically damaged T-55 that we just killed with the cannon. I did use a lot more cannon rounds than I would have expected. A lot of that's missing. A lot of that is from frame rate. So there is one more weapon system we haven't demonstrated yet, and we have something that we're capable of demonstrating it on. So we don't need the TGP anymore, so I'm going to go ahead and set that to standby. We have no more laser guided munitions we're going to use, so I'm going to go ahead and set that to safe. So we're not using the laser anymore. We're going to leave the cannon on for this next part. And I am searching right now. Oh, is that my guy? Nope, maybe not. Ah, there we are. Ta-da! You might not see it, but there against the clouds, that black speck. This is not the mission of the A-10. This is not what A-10s are for. This is not what they're good at. However, we do carry 2 defensive AIM-9 Sidewinders for a reason. Now, I said one of the tricks to refueling was to fly formation and practice formation flying. Well, here's a perfectly good place where we can practice formation flying. Now, I don't know his speed. He's not going to tell me his speed. The only reason I knew this altitude is because I knew it from the mission. But it is, if we were supplemented by AWACS or anything else, they could just as easily have told me that there was a bandit at this altitude, or a bogey, because I don't actually know. Well, of course I know, I wrote the mission. But we're going to pretend for a moment that we don't know what nationality this aircraft is that we're coming up on. In fact, of course we know, because we said it in the mission, and we looked. But as we come up on him, we see a white, red, and blue, white, blue, and red flag on his tail with a bright red star. Now, in this mission, and for this purpose, Russia is Red Coalition. So this aircraft is unfriendly. And when I say practice formation flying, this is the kind of formation flying I'm talking about. This guy is in a gentle turn. We are close enough to read his markings. We are close enough to see the HUD through his canopy. If I do this too close, we will bump him. Okay, he's just warned me that he's going to start straightening out. So what are we going to do? We're going to straighten out. Catch back up to him a little bit. Now, if we want to end his day, we know that we can squeeze the cannon trigger, and we will end his day. Well, not aimed like this, because it would actually fly past him and go into the ocean. But we've already demonstrated the cannon, and we know that what the 30mm cannon will do to an aircraft. It'll do more than it'll do to a tank, so yeah, we know what it will do to an aircraft. So instead, what we are going to do is we're going to manage our center of gravity, and we're going to stay with him. We're going to go to air-to-air mode. Air-to-air mode is a long press on your mode select button. And you hear the growling. That is the AIM-9 Sidewinder seeker head. I have just DMS right twice to get the gun ribbon going. And TMS, that's target management switch, up short, puts the seeker head into search mode. Now, anything we want to know about this guy, we see that he's carrying 2 anti-ship missiles and lots of fuel and I think that thing in the middle, it's a radar. So this guy is up to no good on this island. Let's go ahead and slip behind him here. Now, this is a lot closer than you want to be if you're going to open up in an AIM-9. And mind you, this is not an aircraft that's dogfighting me. This is a target. If we were doing this in a if we were this close in a dogfight, that guy has long since lost. But you'll notice our AIM-9 isn't locking on. It is because we are, in fact, too close. So what I need to do is open this distance up. Now, in real life, I wouldn't have gotten this, well, unless I was doing visual confirmation, I wouldn't have gotten this close before I started trying to lock. There we go. There's our lock. Fox 2. Pull up because there's a lot of wreckage we might have flown through. And we see that the pilot survived because he bailed out. There's the chute. Now I've shut off our air-to-air mode by hitting a short press of the master mode button, which is the index finger at the end of the stick on a true Warthog HOTAS. You may have noticed in the targeting pod earlier that there is also a helicopter flying around, but we've demonstrated all of the necessary systems here. It is an Mi-24 Hind. If I went battering away at it with a cannon, it will take quite a bit. So let's move on to the next phase of the mission. The next phase of the mission is actually refueling. We don't have to refuel. We've got plenty. That's 6,000 pounds. That's plenty to get home. But the aircraft is a different weight on our way out, so it's a good practice to refuel again. If we had a long range, now you recall that we set our TACAN is still set to 1 X-ray, which is our tanker, and we see that that is he is 14 miles away. We can roll our waypoint back to refuel if we want. With the tanker, we want our countermeasures in standby. We want our cannon off. We want our master arm off. TGP doesn't matter. And we want our lights on, so pinky switch forward for regular flight lights. Same thing as fence out. There's our tanker. Now, because we're also quite a bit lighter, we're quite a bit faster, so we're going to be able to hit the tanker. You'll see that we have few armament. I don't need the helmet-mounted queuing system, so DMS right long, or excuse me, left long, to shut off the helmet-mounted queuing system eyepiece. Okay, we're inside 10 miles. We're going to go ahead and call the tanker.
Texaco 1-1, Tusk 1-1, request rejoin.
Tusk 1-1, Texaco 1-1, proceed to pre-contact at 15,000 at 260.
Again, 15,260 knots indicated. I don't think he's really doing 260, and he's probably going to slow to 180 once we get cleared to contact. But we're still going to roar up on him as quick as we can. As you recall, I like to be zoomed out and angled up a little bit. Actually, we're not going to angle up right now because we still got to open our fuel door. Okay, we're going to go ahead and open the fuel door. That's that control still. Alright, we're a little wild because we're of how much lighter we are than we were last time. Zoomed out a little further than I want to be. There we go. Again, we closed being in formation with him. Okay, he's flying 160, not 260, so we're going to deploy the air brakes to slow down and hang out. Now you notice when I did this last time, I kind of hung back and said, oh, okay, we're in formation because we were able to see him. When you practice formation on the tanker to prepare yourself for in-flight refueling, the tutorial I read on the subject said to put your canopy between those engines. Now, I haven't found it necessary to actually ride with the canopy between those engines, but this distance, get over your fear of running into him. Alright, at this range, go ahead and tell him we are ready.
Ready, pre-contact.
Cleared contact?
Yeah, that's gonna happen. You see, he also hauled away from us. Tankers do that. He was doing 160, and then as soon as he said clear to contact, he decided to accelerate to 180, 181. Real tankers don't do that. This is something that would be incredibly dangerous. Because now I'm scrambling to play catch-up. But DCS tankers, for whatever reason, they have a tendency to fly at one speed and then change their speed. You also notice that my tanker is doing a circular orbit. I set that on purpose, because if you can refuel in a circular orbit, the tanker's where you expect it to be, and you don't have to worry about it maneuvering too much after contact. Now, they do level out at one point during the circular orbit, which can be really annoying, but they don't go from level to sudden bank and then level again, like they do with racetrack orbits. So we're going to go ahead and bully up here.
contact.
Here we go. And
You're taking fuel.
we are watching the tanker, the aircraft, where the wings join the body. I'm trying to keep those in a constant place in my view. I'm only watching the boom for distance. And I'm reacting before I need to react with the throttle. We need to be light on pushing forward because we are lighter than we used to be. So when you refuel after dropping all your ordnance, it's way easy to slam into the tanker, because if you push the throttle forward fast, you're going to gain speed faster than you did when you were full of bombs. It is one of the things to be aware of. It is one of the things to be careful about. It is one of the things to be conscious of. Now, I am still getting heavier as I take on fuel, but I'm not going to be taking on anywhere near as much fuel as I dropped in high explosives. I dropped at least two 2,000-pound bombs, two 500-pound bombs, a bunch of 70mm rockets, and the cannon rounds don't weigh nothing. Okay, we didn't quite make it all in one contact this time. So, go ahead and reset that. Again, nose wheel steering. Button 1 hit, so it says ready.
Contact.
There we go, boom operator's connected us
You're
again.
taking fuel.
Now, I have way more than enough fuel to get home at this point. So I could have disconnected and told him to cancel. And if I accidentally disconnect again, I will, because I don't really need the extra 2,000 pounds. Come on. 600 more. 600 more. Nope, nope, now it's 600 more. 500 more. 4. 3, 2, 1.
Transfer complete. Disconnect.
Okay, proper thing to do. Drop altitude and see him go bye-bye. Okay, let's close our fuel hatch. Cover. Let's set our waypoint to approach. Now, I did say in the mission briefing that if we set our TACAN to 99x, we're also going to turn on our ILS. That's a right click on the power button. Or excuse me, our ILS receiver. We're going to go ahead and put our display. Now our TACAN navigation is we're going to try and navigate to, if we were to have lost our CDU for any reason, we can navigate using TACAN, and we know that from, we can check this on a map. It's how I did it to tell in the briefing what the space and distance was, or what the bearing and distance was, is that it's bearing 233 at 12 miles is our initial approach point. The other thing we can do is we can call ATC and ask them tell them that we're approaching, and they will advise us what heading they want us to fly and for how long, and If there's traffic, this is the kind of thing that you would talk about with, if you're flying multiplayer online, you would talk about with other people, make sure that you're not going to run into each other. You call for clearance, say which runway you're taking, which runway you're approaching, distances, all those kinds of things. Good coordinated multiplayer missions tend to have several people launching at the same time and several people landing close together in time. The A-10s are usually going to be landing behind everybody else because we've got so much fuel and loiter time that they'll have all made 2 runs in the time that you've used your ordnance for the first run. So, the TACAN navigation, as you see the small needle there pointing, the quick way to do it is, since we know that it's heading 233 at 12, is to close to 12 miles and then fly in orbit. If you are good at calculating, you can draw lines on the map, figure out, okay, so we want to be 233, so I'm going to fly, 120 as that sort of swings around until it gets to like 200 or so, and then I'm gonna turn inbound and get to the 12-mile point. We can do all of those things; they all work. Since our CDU actually does function right now and it's still operating, we know that to be where we want to be, we actually need to fly 151 because we have a working waypoint, and you see there it is in space. So before I call inbound, because we got a couple of minutes here, let's go ahead and talk about the kind of landing we're going to do. We're going to do an ILS approach. That is, I'm going to line up from our approach point, and then I'm going to use the ILS indicators to get me to runway center line, and I'm going to fly it as close as I can down to the point. We are going to be able to see the runway. I don't actually need to use the ILS, but it's a good demonstration because there are some tricks to the A-10 ILS. The A-10's ILS does not indicate runway center line. The A-10's ILS indicator does not indicate runway center line. It indicates bank to intercept runway center line. That'll be obvious. That'll be more evident as I approach. If you fly it without configuring anything else, you will be way off on your approach. One of the things that you need to do if you're going to fly an ILS approach is you need to use your course set knob and set the true runway heading of the runway you intend to land on. Now we're landing on 30 right at Dubai International, which we know has a true runway heading of 302. We know that because 1, it was briefed. 2, it's on the air chart. If we bring up the if we have a approach chart for it, we can also do this by going to F10 view and using the ruler tool to measure the runway, and we look at the magnetic heading. The magnetic heading is 302. So we have to set that up first. We have to tune our ILS receiver. We know that the runway we're going to is 110.9 because it was briefed. We can also check that in the F10 menu. 30R is that. We have to power this on. This is the right click that brought it to power. We have to come down here to our navigation modes, and we have to turn on ILS. We have to uncage our ILS needles. And we're going to turn off TACAN, and we're going to turn on, actually we're going to turn off steer point too. No, we're going to turn on steer point because it's going to be useful. Alright, so we see red flags, which means that we have no indications right now. You see over there is Dubai International. We're actually passing over another airport right now. Normally we would avoid that, but we're the only plane in the sky. And we know that, well, other than the tanker. The tanker's not coming home anytime soon. The only other airplane in the sky took an AIM-9 Sidewinder, and now he's in the ocean. So we get to, you know, play a little fast and loose when we're the only people around. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and call air traffic control and tell them that we're on our way. So Dubai International, we're telling them we're inbound. You notice it was highlighted because I already tuned the radio to that frequency and I left it alone.
Tusk 1-1, inbound.
Tusk 1-1. Fly heading 177, Fort 10, QFE 29.91, runway 30, to pattern altitude.
Alright, so we're going to turn 177. We're going to fly that for 10 miles. And we're actually going to go a little shallow on that. And the reason we're going to go a little shallow on that is because I want the extra time to let you see the ILS indicator. We see the airport, we have it in sight. It's right there. We're zoomed in. You see how the two runways are offset the way that I described earlier when we took off? That is to say their thresholds are at different points. Pattern altitude, we're going to want to be lower. Alright, we're seeing an indication now. We're seeing an indication on our ILS receiver. That is our bank indicator of bank to intercept. So if it were true runway centerline indication, it would be moving closer as I'm flying, but notice it moves as I bank. Okay, with that bank, that is the bank that's going to put me on a turn to intercept that center line. Not where I want to be at the moment because we haven't intercepted the glide slope yet. I am pulling the pinky switch all the way back so that my lights are flashing because I'm in a terminal. I'm going to turn on my landing lights. I'm going to set my flaps to landing position, and I'm going to throw the air brake all the way out. Okay, see the glide slope no longer shows a red flag. That's because we've intercepted glide slope. See my air brakes are all the way out, as I said. But we are above the glide slope. So I am turning away from the airfield. There we are. There's the glide slope. Now I'm going to start flying the ILS. So the reason that we deploy the air brakes is so that we can have the engine spooled up a little higher, because it's easier for them to... Okay, so this is where this ILS gets a little confusing. It is actually going to try and fly us directly away from the runway if we follow it, because we are angled away. So we want to be generally in the right heading. And there we are. Okay, we are below glide slope, so we're going to come up some. Okay, so we're adjusting our steering and our thrust. Okay, being at 2,000 feet and 4 miles away, we're going to go ahead and drop our gear. And naturally, we're going to look over here for our 3 green. If you think I'm kidding about that ILS approach, Okay, generally we want our descent rate to be 500 feet per minute, not more. If we are on glide slope.
Task 1-1. Cleared for visual. Contact tower.
Okay, we're not getting our distance to runway like I'd like. So we basically have to ignore that indicator. We're going to focus on the ILS indicator. We're below glide slope. That is a bad thing. We're also going a lot slower than we want to be.
Altitude, altitude.
Okay, we're now at 500 feet. So what do you think? You want to look and see where we are?
Task 1-1. Check landing gear. Wind 120 at 2 meters per second. Runway 30.
Okay, so our course was not perfectly set because we are showing that we need to bank to get on centerline when in fact we are on centerline. Okay, let's zoom out a little bit. We're going to go ahead and bring our speed way down as we bring our nose up because we want our vertical airspeed to be low, smooth. Go ahead and apply some brakes. We're below 70 knots, so we can turn on nose wheel steering. We want to get off the runway quickly, so we're going to keep our ground speed up a little bit. And go ahead and bring up the flaps.
Task 1-1. Taxi to parking area.
And bring the air brakes in. Remember what I said about the hold short lines? We're moving from dotted to solid, so we're clear we don't need to ask permission. So our parking area is over there by the gates. We're nimble, so we can actually make this turn. So we're going to go ahead and make this turn. In real life, we would stop at this hold short line, and we would ask permission. In a multiplayer server, we would just kind of look around and make sure there's no other airplanes. And then we would rush across the runway, looking over here, start screaming if we see somebody. Dash to solid, we're clear. Look around to make sure we don't hit anybody while we're taxiing. Generally keep to the yellow lines. And then when we find the gate that we're parking at, we're going to go ahead and turn in. We're going to take that one over by that airliner. Now, if you want to take off for another sortie, you don't want to park in such a place that you can't turn the plane. So, I have a habit when I park the A-10 of turning it around. Now you'll notice that I only pushed up on the right engine. Helps me turn tighter. This is not a good airport for precision parking, but if I wanted to, yeah, let's go ahead and do precision parking. We're going to get right on this line. Okay. That completes our mission and landing and our ILS approach. I'm going to go ahead and cage the needles. Turn off ILS. Put that back to TACAN mode. So now we're going to go through an abbreviated shutdown. Basically, the way I shut down is the way that I start up, except in reverse. Make sure we turn off PTO. We're going to turn off that. We're going to turn off our TACAN. We're going to turn off our ILS receiver. We're going to unlock our canopy. We're going to pop the canopy button up. Turn off our countermeasures systems. Turn off the switch. Right-click shutting off the CDUs. We're going to turn off those landing lights. We don't need our anti-skid. We definitely don't need master caution telling us we turned off anti-skid. I know we did, we just turned it off. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and start the APU. Now the reason I'm starting the APU is so that I have electrical power as I continue with other things once I kill the engines. The APU comes up to speed. There we are, it's up to speed. Turn on the generator. Now we will have electrical power as we deal with everything else. We're going to shut off our HUD. We're going to shut off jitters. We're going to shut off Kiku. The TGP, I made a point of putting it in standby so that its head is protected. We're going to shut off the TGP. We're going to switch to HARS navigation, and you'll notice that switch I told you was going to flip back. It flipped back. I'm also going to turn off my radar altimeter. I'm going to disarm the ejection, turn off remote 4 IFF. Cage or standby attitude indicator, and spin it to lock it. I'm going to start killing radios. We don't need that. We don't need our tactical radio. Turn off our IFF. Kill the left engine. And go ahead. Turn these off. They will flip when our engines are off as well. Now the other reason that we have the APU running is so that once our engines are off, we can put them into motor. I'll go ahead and let the engine stop and show you. What motor does is it clears the engine of fuel. This is necessary to restart the engine if we want to. If we have a misstart. So that engine isn't actually running and generating electricity right now. It's just running, cycling fuel out of it. It's actually the APU that's running it. Let's switch it back to normal. Switches for that operation are over here. We set it to motor. We set it to reset. Set to 0. Okay. Fuel flow is not necessary. Shutting that off. We don't need the pumps, boost pumps. We can go ahead and kill the left engine. We don't need its fuel flow. Now, if you want to repair this aircraft by calling ground crew to request repair, your engines have to be shut completely off, and your APU has to be off and not spinning. Again, we're going to put this in the motor to cycle the fuel out of it. Let it run for a couple of seconds, switch back to normal. Also, the fans have to stop spinning in order for the repair crew to want to touch your airplane. That's true of all airplanes. It's just this one doesn't let you use the APU either. Okay, that panel is secured from flight, except for the APU, which is still running. I'm going to turn off the generators. We can turn off the oxygen supply. We're going to set the pinky switch back to the center. We're going to turn off that. We're going to kill the formation lights. If we were flying at night and we had used any of these, we would set them back to 0. Okay, we no longer need the EGI or the CDU, so we're going to go ahead and shut those off. And with everything in the off position except for our ATC radio, we're now going to shut off our ATC radio. I'm going to go ahead and kill the APU generator. And we're going to stop the APU. You saw that switch there. Set the inverter to test, let it go to off, kill the battery. And the only other thing to do is deploy the boarding ladder. So that we can get out of the airplane. The boarding ladder requires a ground crew to stow it. And that's it. You can see we fired at least one of everything. We had some ordnance left. That was mostly for demo purposes. Had I missed, I could have dropped some more just to demonstrate the accuracy or the function. Thank you very much. I hope you found this informative, and it'd be okay if you found it entertaining as well.